Michael Foot has died at the age of 96. A committed socialist, he entered Parliament in 1945 and became leader in 1980. His left-wing manifesto in the 1983 general election was dubbed the longest suicide note in history, and it was blamed for the party's heavy defeat. Sean Leigh looks back at his life.
What we've got to do is to use this conference as one of the great instruments for persuading our movement to re-adopt the socialist policies on which we were elected.
Michael Foot was one of the greatest platform orators of the 20th century. Yet he was also among the Labour Party's least successful leaders, presiding over its worst defeat in 50 years. The son of a former Liberal MP, he was shaped by a non-conformist childhood in the West Country. As protégé of the powerful newspaper owner Lord Beaverbrook, he came to prominence editing the London Evening Standard, before entering Parliament as MP for Plymouth in Labour's post-war landslide.
Burn the bomb!
He pressed for a more radical agenda, especially in defence policy, helping to found the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament.
It is a mighty upsurge of democratic protest.
His lifelong hero was Aneurin Bevan, the leader of Labour's left wing. He was to be Bevan's successor as MP for Edward Vale. In 1974, as Employment Secretary, he faced anger there over rising local job losses.
I'll tell you the truth as I've always told you the truth.
Michael Foot became leader after Labour's 1979 election defeat, inheriting a divided party. With the so-called Gang of Four about to quit Labour to form the SDP, he made a futile plea for unity.
I do not want to push anybody out of this party. I want to spend my time bringing people into this party, and I ask this movement to help us.
But not everyone was leaving. New arrivals included the young Tony Blair, fighting his first election.
We believe that he's going to have a very big future in British politics.
Michael Foot's appearance made him an easy target for mockery. The coat he wore on one Remembrance Sunday derided in the newspapers as a donkey jacket. Greater damage was inflicted by a left-wing election manifesto dubbed the longest suicide note in history. The 1983 campaign was chaotic and demoralising. Soon after Labour's heavy defeat, he resigned. Two things commanded Michael Foot's lifelong loyalty: Plymouth Argyle and Labour. He lived to see both recover their fortunes, having held the Labour Party together when it came closest to self-destruction.
That was Sean Leigh reporting. Let's get more from our political correspondent Laura Kuenssberg, who joins us from Westminster. And looking back, it seems like a very different kind of era of politics.
I think that's certainly true. I mean, in the last 15 minutes or so, just some of the words that MPs have been describing Michael Foot to me as: passionate, intelligent, erudite, charming, straight as a die. But all that said, somebody who would not have been at home in the modern way of doing politics. John Reid, the former Cabinet Secretary, just told me a story where he, as a young Labour Party worker, had been trying to get Michael Foot to take part in a short television piece of 4 minutes. And for Michael Foot, who was a very different character, that was just a nightmare, because he was somebody who loved speaking on a platform. He had a great love of literature and oratory, and was a fine speaker in the House of Commons. But the kind of rough and tumble, the soundbite culture that politics is now, was something that he was not comfortable in and was not necessarily well suited to. But I have to say, I've been struck by the great fondness with which people have been talking about him as this news has circulated around Westminster. Somebody who was a heavy presence here right up into the late years of his life. He was even here at a reception in the House of Commons just last autumn, when he was well into his 90s, at that point still taking part in some political debates.
And Laura, he was leader of the Labour Party at a very turbulent time, wasn't he?
Yes, that's certainly true, and many people might remember that famous description made by one of his own MPs of Labour's election manifesto in 1983, him authoring that as the longest political suicide note in history. That aside, I think that people will look back and think, well, he did actually manage to hold the party together, just about. Certainly times were turbulent, certainly there was a lot of controversy and disagreement about just how far to the left the Labour Party should be. Times were difficult, but at the same time Michael Foot did manage to keep the party together, and already here Labour figures have been paying tribute to that skill that he had. One of them saying to me, he managed to keep us together because he was a decent man and we all liked him.
Laura, thank you, and we'll have more on Michael Foot later here in the programme.